Hello and welcome to the Story Behind the Stories, your weekly look at the pages of the Neepawa Banner Press. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of your time and spending it right here with us on NACTV. I'm Eoin, Devereux, news reporter with the Banner Press, welcoming you, and joined this week by owner, operator, publisher Ken Waddell of the Banner Press.
Good to be here.
Ken, I'm sure it is, because we got a whole heap and heck of a lot to talk about in this week's edition of the Banner Press. Obviously, the big story that is still going around and has ripples and waves across Manitoba is the provincial election and the results that came from it. You can see those results for Agassiz and Riding Mountain right on the front page of the Banner Press in big, bold color. And as you can see, Jody Byram, congratulations on winning Agassiz. She will be representing our riding in the legislature. Although she will be doing it, Ken, from a slightly different angle, as it were, isn't she?
Yeah, for sure. Not the angle she was hoping for, because she's going to be in opposition, not on the government side. And so the representation for Neepawa will change a little bit. We've been used to, for the last little while here, be having a cabinet minister representing our constituency, which always seems to help a bit. And so not only will Jody not be a cabinet minister, she won't be on the government side. But it was a pretty decisive vote across the province, or should I say mostly in Winnipeg. But it is what it is, and there's a lot of things could be discussed about how it went down.
Now, we're going to talk a little bit about this, and we're going to talk about some of the things that are not in the paper. That is the point of this show, to talk about the perspectives behind the print, as it were. If you want the details, a full in-depth story, I did an interview with Jody, got her perspective on it. You can find that in this week's edition of the paper. As for what you're going to see right here, is going to be a little bit of a review, maybe an obituary for what happened come election night. Let me just ask you, point blank, Ken, where did it go wrong for the PCs?
Well, it didn't start at the 1st of September with the election, that's for sure. There's a lot of history there that people were tired of. The PC's been in power since 2015, I guess. And although Brian Pallister's reign started off quite promising for a lot of voters because he had a majority, he in 2015 and 2019. But the governments, as governments tend to do, wore out their welcome, and people turned against that. And then, there was a lot of people who would normally vote PC who may have changed their mind, or maybe stayed home, or maybe just didn't vote. They weren't happy with the whole selection process for the new leader. And it was an unfortunate way things turned out, or way it was all unfolded. That was another factor. And then, there's been lots of discussion during the election campaign, and certainly a lot more since, that the whole tone of the campaign just didn't go over well with people.
That's a very interesting point, and I have said that a couple times as well to some people, is that the NDP, for the most part, stayed out of their own way on this. And they let the PCs essentially do their work for them in terms of picking apart some of the agenda, some of the notable items that they were trying to push forward. The PCs really, I was shocked and a little bit surprised by how they fumbled the ball on this campaign in general.
Well, I certainly have some opinions about where it went wrong and why it went wrong. In general, it went wrong the same ways that every other PC government has lost their way over the years, and that is they decided to change their message. Their message is supposed to be, lower taxation, smaller government, look after people who can't look after themselves. Instead, they got involved with an attack ads on Wob Canoe, which most people, including myself, thought were foolish and not really fair. There was things that were said in there that were, while they were true, they're from a long time ago. And Wab Kinew got ahead of them on that one because he came right out during the election campaign and made what they call now the big speech halfway through, where he said, basically, I wasn't a very nice person. I've learned from it. I've changed. I'm sorry. Time to move on. And he obviously has moved on. He has a wife and 3 kids. His wife was with him during the whole campaign, she's a medical doctor. So who better to have beside you in a health care based campaign than a doctor? And he just really turned it all back on them. And they made a martyr out of Wab Kinew, and they certainly shouldn't have. Trust me, they were advised not to, and they didn't take that advice. It's very easy to motivate a base of people behind someone if you're beating them up unfairly, and it was seen as being beating up Wab Kinew unfairly.
Well, it was one of those things. It was very interesting on election night to see how the entire evening played out. If you watched any of it, you saw that, as Ken had mentioned earlier, urban center, Winnipeg, very specifically, went bright orange. And rural areas, for the most part, went blue, with the interesting exception being, although I think they still have to do a recount just because it was so close, Dauphin, yes. I believe, is orange. And Brandon West
It's close, yes.
is close as well. So it's interesting to see how so-called sort of maybe safe areas or unexpected areas just gave in as well and sort of gave in to the frustration.
Well, Brandon West has been traditionally a conservative stronghold. It has been NDP at times, and the former police chief ran there for the Conservatives. I think the last count is, with all the polls reporting, he's ahead by 97 votes, but I don't know if they're going to verify that without a recount. Dauphin is a little bigger spread where the NDP have won at this point, but in Dauphin they brought in a very experienced politician, a former Reeve, a farmer, former MLA from, because the boundaries changed, and he's a former MLA for the Swan River, former Minister of Agriculture, and a very personable man. I happen to know Mr. Costician reasonably well, and I could see people saying, well, okay, whatever, and he swung a lot of people his way.
That's interesting. You talk about certain ridings where the NDP felt that they had opportunity to flip, but there were other areas, other ridings, where it seemed like they were going through the motions. Let's talk about that then, Ken, and let's be honest. Agassiz is most definitely one of those as well. The only time some people knew that there was an NDP candidate in Agassiz is when they walked up and they were going to mark on the check, on election day on the ballot, because you saw nothing.
No.
Almost anywhere for NDP.
And didn't they nearly double their vote from last time?
That's true.
Didn't even show up.
In the 2019, they had a candidate here whom I spoke with face to face. I think they may have been in this building. If not, they were at the library during the debates. They hit the streets walking and shaking hands and kissing babies and doing all that. And they ended up with just under 900 votes total for Agassiz. And this time we had a candidate who, I'm not 100% sure it wasn't an AI creation from one of those websites. You create that picture there but they still ended up with about 17, was it? Let's check the front page of the paper just to refresh our memory. Danica Wiggins ended up with 1,516 votes, nearly 22% of the vote. And quite honestly, we never saw that person anywhere, not just in Neepawa, but almost anywhere in the riding.
And we tried.
Yeah.
You tried. We all tried to find her. Still don't know if she exists.
Is that interesting, though, when you look at so-called, quote-unquote, safe ridings, Ken? What if they'd put somebody in here that's well-liked in the region? And what if they tried? What do you think could have happened?
Well, they would likely have increased the vote even more. I doubt that they would have won, but it's the kind of swings that were in some of the ridings was pretty significant, including this one. So I've been there, done that. I mean, I went into the opposite situation in 2007, ran an election in Winnipeg in Concordia that's been NDP forever against the sitting premier, and I increased the vote.
Yep.
Not hugely, but we increased the vote because we went to, I think, something like 1,200 doors. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a huge team, but it works. People want to see the candidates.
Yeah.
Especially if they're searching. If their minds are made up, not so much. Sometimes you're lucky if you just get a polite reception. But and strangely enough, you even in that situation, I think, just as a matter of interest, there was I can't remember now, but of the 1,200 doors we knocked on, I might have been treated harshly maybe at 10. Mm-hmm. People are generally pretty decent, and for that I'm thankful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, that is good, and it's interesting to see how it could have laid out, because the demographics in rural ridings are changing. Slowly they are shifting. And I think next time some of these parties need to take it a little more seriously, and perhaps even not take it for granted. You can't see it in this one, and most likely you didn't save a copy of the September 2019 edition of the Banner Press, in which we covered the last election. But I went into the archives and I looked at some of the research. It's interesting to see for many of the ridings, the numbers for the elected candidate, usually a PC candidate, went from about 71% of the vote, 72% of the vote, down to 62, 63, 60% of the vote. And it was consistent. And it was also consistent in some of the urban ones as well. Looking at Brandon, looking at Dauphin, some of Winnipeg as well. Heather Stephenson, for example, as well, her numbers from the last election to this election were surprisingly smaller.
Yeah.
I mean, even an unpopular premier, you would think in their own riding would still have that little buffer, but that wasn't the case.
No, and it's one of the things you go back a couple of sentences, what you're saying there, they need to try harder. And having been involved directly with campaigns and having at one time being a candidate, it's an awful lot of work. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that, and I'm not suggesting that they be subsidized by any means, but a person, doesn't matter what party they're going to run for. If they're going to say, okay, I'm going to run in the next election, okay, 4 years from now I'm going to run in the next election, you got to put some time into getting known. Mm-hmm. You got to put some time into getting out and seeing people and whatever. Then you got to put your life on hold for, well, certainly the month of the campaign, but probably several months before that. And you got to make a living somehow at the same time. Yeah. The average wage earner, unless you're independently well off or wealthy, you can't afford to do this. And that's one of the reasons that some of the parties, and the Liberals this time, and the NDP too, the NDP found a candidate for all 57 constituencies. Liberals didn't. It's because it's an awful lot of work, and you put a lot of money and time and effort in it, and no return.
Do you think that was part of the success for Jody here in Agassiz, a first-time candidate, but she put the work in? It was about a year ago where she had announced her intentions to run after Eileen Clark announced that she would not be returning as the candidate or the MLA for Agassiz. So Jody Byram put in a lot of time and effort, a lot of work in there. Do you think that face-to-face extended, as you said, really sort of paid the dividends?
Oh, for sure. Not only is she also well known in her own right, but she was with Eileen Clark everywhere for years, every event, driving, helping, arranging, becoming the second face of the team, so to speak. So that certainly helped her, and that will help her in the future because she's well known and she's approachable. But it's hard to replicate that experience. Like, not everybody can be the EA to the sitting MLA. Not everybody can be that well known across a wide area, and it's very, very difficult to get that kind of momentum going and sustain it financially.
Right. Well, that's our coverage of the election in total right now. You can always find a little bit more on the pages of the Neepawa Banner Press. You can pick it up anywhere in Neepawa and the surrounding areas, into Brandon even. And if you can't find a physical copy, always remember you can track it down every Friday morning on mywestman.ca. What would have been interesting, Ken, and maybe it could have made a difference, a bigger difference. Last Friday, there was an announcement made about a budget surplus for the province of Manitoba. Only the second one since 2009, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And fortunately, you were in the perfect place at the perfect time to get a comment from the then Premier and Progressive Conservative candidate leader, Heather Stephenson. And we've got that in this week's paper.
Yeah, it came out on the Friday, I think it was, and Premier Stephenson was in Neepawa there, and she knows me, but I mean, media, she knows all the media. And so I hit her up on that, and she gave me a quote. I think I talked to her at about 11:30 in the morning. The announcement had been made in Winnipeg at 11, and we knew that from the releases we got. And so it was really good news. I mean, a surplus is a surplus is a surplus, and like you say, there's not many times that you hit that in government anymore. You know, it used to be when I was growing up until my early adult years, very early adult years, a surplus was considered a necessity in running a government.
Yeah.
Now it's whatever, $1 million deficit, $1 billion deficit, or hundreds of millions in deficit, or maybe even $1 billion in deficit. Certainly on the federal level, billions of dollars deficit.
Yeah.
And that goes straight to the debt side.
Yep.
It just puts us further and further in debt. Increases our cost of government because it's there to have to pay interest on it all the time.
Yeah. Again, that was a $270 million surplus for 2022-23. First time that's occurred since 2009. So very good news on that, and hopefully the NDP will be able to take that money and put it exactly where they say they're going to put it, into healthcare. But we'll see how that plays out in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
Well, I would just like to add one thing, Owen, if I might, and that is that I do know Wob Canoe quite well. I say quite well. We're not exactly partying buddies or anything, but I actually hosted him at a banquet when I was president of MCNA. I've talked to him many times, and he is very approachable. He's a friendly guy to voters, and I think that there's a chance that they will do quite well, but they'll have to temper their expectations, or temper the expectations of their backers, because they want to spend money on a lot of things. If they can somehow do it and come up with a surplus in their first year, at least,
Yeah.
it would speak volumes.
Everybody made a whole lot of promises during the election, and I kept thinking to myself, well, that sounds amazing, but where are you going to get the money for that?
Yeah.
And now, whomever it was, whether it was the PCs or the NDP, now they're going to have to figure that out for themselves. It'll be interesting to see if they can. All right, let's talk a little more lighthearted about the election. I had an opportunity last week to head down to Neepawa Middle School because they were having their own mock-up provincial election. And it was wonderful to see the youngsters, the students at middle school, learning about the process of politics and participating in it. So they did that whole setup. You can find that story. It's on page 2 of this week's edition of the paper. I'm not going to give away the results. You're going to have to pick up a copy and see them for yourself. But it's wonderful and interesting to see how it played out. Because Joanne Freeman, who I spoke with about that, and her class is the one that organized it and put it all together, she said they wanted the students to take it seriously. That included getting a copy of the debate from Agassi for NAC TV and watching portions of it, learning about the candidates and what they meant and what they represented. And that appears to have played out in the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It did, and it's interesting. The numbers that are in the paper that you can read are pretty interesting for a number of reasons.
Yeah. It's wonderful to see youngsters getting that interest in democracy, because democracy is kind of important in the grand scheme of things. It's one of those good things as opposed to a bad thing. But it's wonderful to see the youngsters getting involved in that way. All right, let's head over from politics over to the arts. And this is a story by Casper Werhan. They were able to get this, and you were saying just before it was from a tip from Chris. Chris was able to.
Yeah. Chris uncovered this one, and Jerry Oliver from Carberry leads an arts program at Touchwood here in Neepawa, and there's a large group of people from Touchwood pictured in the paper there that had art featured at the show in Brandon. The headline says it all. It was nerve-wracking to be that famous. Anyway.
Don't I know it?
Yeah. This program does it for you. Anyway, really, really encouraging there. Obviously, the clients, residents at Touchwood really appreciate what Jerry Oliver does and the opportunity they have with their art. And it's pretty darn good art, too.
Because they were able to show some of their pieces at the Southwestern Gallery in Brandon. And it is a wonderful sort of exhibit area. They always bring in these wonderful sort of different varieties of art, and to see them to be able to do something like this with Touchwood, and it really looked like it was a fantastic evening. So very proud to be able to share the details of that with you in this week's edition of the paper. You can find that, of course, that's going to be on page 8 of this week's edition. I wouldn't be able to do it justice just to explain it to you, so hopefully you pick up a copy and take a few minutes of your time to sort of learn about it and see how it all played out. Speaking of play, let's get onto the ice here. Ken, the Neepawa Titans, they had a couple games this week.
Yeah.
They had a couple games on the road, though, this week in Winnipeg against the Blues and the Freeze, and it all kind of played out all right for them, didn't it?
Back-to-back wins, which we haven't been able to say that very many times over the years.
It's nice to be able to say that, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I mean, admittedly, the Freeze and the Ice haven't been traditionally the stronger teams in the league, but on the other hand, the Titans did beat Portage, so
yeah.
They didn't do very well against Verdun, but they beat Portage and they beat the Ice and the Freeze, so they're actually, I think, tied for second place in the league right now.
They are tied in the division, yes. Dauphin Kings have jumped out to a 4-win, 1-loss record. They're going to be a challenge, so that's going to be interesting to see. Wayway Sakapo as well, the other team that we ended up losing, and during their home opener, they're in tied for second with us, I believe, but they have the tiebreaker because they have more goals for than against.
Yeah.
It's still early. I mean, later on in the year, math becomes important, but right now we're just got to be happy with where we're at and how we seem to be playing out.
Well, they say math is hard, but playing hockey seems to be hard too.
Yeah. Once again, don't forget the Titans are going to be back home this weekend. They're going to have a game against the Niverville Nighthawks, the surprisingly skilled and good Niverville Nighthawks in their second year in the league. They've really amped things up this year. They're in second place in their division, I believe. So it should be a great game. If you can't get down there in person to see it, it's going to be happening Saturday night, I believe.
Yeah.
But if you can't be there, always tune in to NAC TV because when they do broadcast all those games a day or so, a couple days later. So check your local listings. If you're not able to be down at the Yellowhead yourself, you can still see it right here on NAC TV. So
yeah, good hockey. Interesting enough, NAC TV got a kudos this week. They were advised by the league that they had the best audio and best video in the whole league right now. There was a time when we didn't. Many years ago we did, and then other teams pulled ahead of us with technology. But just to put in a bit of a shameless plug here for support for the TV station, that good camera that gives that great video on the hockey games is a $2,500 camera. So when we switched to digital 6 or 7 years ago, we were using $250 cameras, but now to get real good video, it's $2,500.
Yeah. Well, again,
send your donations in.
That's the reality of it as well, and it is interesting because I do watch a lot of the MJHL events on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. I'm not going to call it X, it's Twitter. Let's stop that nonsense.
Yeah.
So, but to see other teams, and I'm not going to name the other teams in question because that would be embarrassing to them, but they should be embarrassed perhaps because good organizations, quote-unquote well-organized, well-run, well-funded organizations have this blurry picture, and they have commentators who it feels like they've never watched the game of hockey before. And the ones that have watched the game of hockey before, it sounds like over the ice, blue line. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like garbage. It sounds like they're using cameras from the 1980s.
Yeah.
So don't take NACTV for granted, because they do step up, very much so.
Very proud of NACTV. They've done a lot of improvements over the years, and I've been very proud to be part of it. And we got great staff here and had good support from the community, but we certainly wouldn't turn down more donations.
And thank you for tuning into the Pledge campaign.
Yeah.
You can, at this number, you can toll free. Oh, no. But before we wrap up, let's talk really quickly about a special feature that we have in this week's edition of the paper. 4 color pages, a salute to the firefighters and the volunteers, not just in Neepawa, but all across our readership distribution area. We'd love to be able to do this each and every year to show support for those that see beyond themselves and support their communities. So the volunteer firefighters and the others that are involved with that. And we tried to hit every single community we could, get their pictures, get their names, get all that information. It is a bit of an effort, though, isn't it, Ken?
Yeah, it just about broke us this week psychologically, if nothing else. But I did a quick count there. We weren't able to get pictures of every department, but most of them. And we are covering 15 departments in the Neepawa Banner and Press coverage area. And thank God we got those guys out there, guys and gals, protecting us, you know, and everything from the false alarm to the grass fire to the major disaster fires. They're there for us, and highway traffic incidents and all the rest of it. Kudos to those folks who willing to be volunteer firefighters.
And important to realize as well, it's 4 pages full of pictures of these individuals and advertisers supporting them, saying thank you as well. Not all of that gets put together magically. We got individuals like Joel and doing sales, yourself out there as well, hitting sales, Diane Warner, who puts all those pages together. We stay out of her way as best we can while she's doing that. Very appreciative of all those little minute details that you might not think are a part of putting the paper together, that just you never even think of, that are a huge part of it.
Well, different times that people will come to you, and if they're interested, I give them a quick tour of the building. And because we have 3 rooms for the NACTV, but the rest of the building is all tied up, except for a small portion of the basement where it's at Neepawa Titans Administrative Center. But there's a lot goes on in here, from flyer stuffing to shipping, receiving, collecting the ads, building the ads, collecting the stories, getting them on the pages, doing the show, this show, and all the social media work as well. There's a lot goes into the newspaper, and I've shamelessly plugged that in our columns over the years. And about a month ago or something, maybe a little longer ago, I did a column called "Cling to Your Local Newspaper." When you remember that one, and it was reprinted across the United States as well, and in several places in Canada. But people realize that, you know, if you don't support your local newspaper, and we've got over 20 examples in Manitoba where it didn't happen, because there's 22 papers gone. And if you support your paper, you've got a good thing going. But after it's gone, it'll likely never come back.
Well, for the time being, we're still here, and we're still working away. And we always try to. So if you have any story suggestions or ideas for us, they're always appreciated. And you can always reach us right here at the Neepawa Banner and Press at news@neepawabanner.com. If you don't want to send us an email, you can always give us a call at 476-3401. The front desk will be able to pass that information on. And we always try as best we can to chase down those story ideas. We always appreciate it. We thank you for your support, not just in the paper, but right here on NACTV as well, and the story behind the stories. Hope that you have another great week.